Hello, my name is Lisa, and today we're going to work on an initial capital letter G. We'll say sort of in the medieval style, because medieval documents often had a nice big initial drop cap, but you use it in all sorts of other kinds of styles too. They had it in the Renaissance, they had it in Victorian times, so you can do it in whichever style you want to, and for whatever purpose you want to. I like to decorate these with symbols that mean something to the person for whom I'm making them. I think for this G I'm going to go with a flower theme. So what we'll do is we will draw this in pencil first, and then we will trace those pencil lines with the pen, and then we will paint it in with the watercolors. So step one is to draw it with the pencil. So there's all sorts of models of the letter G out there if you want to draw a particular style that someone else has designed. I like to just draw things freehand. So the G has a big round curve to it. Just trying to think how far down I want it to come. Alright, so that's a good basic shape. So then the question is, what kind of flourishes and other things do I want in there? I like to have pointy end to it, and then I like to have thicker and thinner ends so that I can put my decorations into the center of the areas. So I'm going to start with a pointy end over here and swoop that around. Like that. Alright, that gives us a area here to put in a curl. That gives us an area here to put in a curl. Alright, so generally drawing the basic shape for a letter should be fairly straightforward, because most of the letters in our alphabet are fairly straightforward for obvious reasons. These are things people have to draw over and over and over again, and they were designed to be pretty straightforward. So next the question is, what kind of decorations and flourishes shall we add to this to make this a little interesting? Well, we have this little shelf area here on the flat part of a G. I like to put creatures resting on flat areas whenever I have them. I think first I'm going to flatten it out a little bit. Got a little slanty. So I'm going to bring this across. There we go. And I think I will put the cat facing inward so that I can have a place over here for the tail, because I already have a spiral over there. So we will put the cat head here. So we have the ears there, and the cat body. So I'll leave the space for the tail over here. Alright, that doesn't quite work. Tails don't connect like that. Which then means that we'll make the cat bigger. So the tail can do that. means the head has to be bigger. Make a bigger head. Alright. Alright, so now we got a cat. Now maybe the tail has to be a little bigger. This is a process. Process of adjusting. Alright, so we got a cat. I'm going to put an inside area to this letter G. I like to have my letters to be two-tone, and creating this inner area makes a natural place for that to happen. Okay, so now we've got an inside and an outside. What else in addition to a cat should we add to this letter C? Well, we can add some flowers. What do we want to do? We put a little pot here. Alright, and I'll just paint the flowers in with the paints rather than drawing them in. Alright, I think that's a good starting point. And we'll do some things freehand to this. Alright, so once you've got the basic design drawn out with your pencil, then you switch over to the pen. And with the pen we're going to go over the lines that we have. If you want to make adjustments to your design as you go, I suggest that you work on your adjustments in pencil, because even when you think that it might just be something quick and easy, be surprised how many times that you realize that it actually changes some other things. So I really suggest that you mark out all your initial plans in pencil and then just go to pen when you have got them set. Also, as much as you think that pen dries instantly, it's a good idea to be careful about where your hands are and not to go over the pen after you've just drawn it, because it does need a bit of drying time. And you want to not smear it. So now we are drawing over the letter G that we've made. Get the cat in there. little decorative flourishes. Got our little pot. Flowers. And again, the flower heads will just be watercolor, so we'll add those in when we get to the watercolor stage. So then something to start thinking about is what color combination we want to use. There are all sorts of color pairs that work well together. And there are all sorts of websites out there that'll create the color pairings for you. So if you put in one color, it'll tell you what other colors naturally go well with that first color. So if you're not sure what colors you want to use, you can use one of the color chart sites to get a sense of what types of colors might work well together. Here's the cat. And the cat's body goes like this. And his little eyes. Okie doke. So we have a cat. We have some flowers. We have a letter G. Alright, what color should we go with? How about blue? Maybe blue and silver. Actually, looking at this, I think I might want a slightly smaller brush than this. Alright, so one of the things about watercolors is that you don't want to paint two wet areas right next to each other while both are wet. Because if those two wet areas touch, then they tend to flow and merge together, just like water naturally does, and then it will get both areas all blurry. So you want to paint one area wet, let it dry, paint the next area wet, and so on. So I'll go with this blue. Now I'll paint the outer area blue. So this is a phthalo blue. This tin, you can buy tins like this from all sorts of different places, and they are just a holder for your tubes of watercolor. And the reason I like to do it that way is that it's frugal. You buy the tube once, you put in however much you need. When you start to run out, then you just squish some more from the tube into there. And it's fine that it dries out because it's natural for watercolor paints to dry out. I'm sure many of you have worked with the circular tins of watercolors where they come pre-supplied for you in little circle shapes, and they come to you dry, and then you just add some water to make them wet. You work with them, they dry out again, and then you add some more water, and that is fine. It's also nice when you get your own tin, because that way you can put in the colors that you tend to work with the most. So instead of being stuck with colors that someone else decided that you would want to paint with, you can choose for yourself which colors you want to paint with. And then if you change your mind, like if you never ever use a certain shade of orange, then you just empty the orange out of that spot and put something else in there. It is completely up to you. coming in here. So how are you guys doing today? Enjoying your spring? So we all have a certain hand angle that works best for us for painting along lines. So it's good practice to get into turning your paper around so that you can get to the section you need to as smoothly as possible. And if that involves rotating the paper around, then that is fine. If you like to tape your paper to cardboard for whatever reason, I recommend using a small piece of cardboard so that you can still rotate the cardboard with it too. But as you can see, I don't tend to tape my watercolor down. The reason some people tape their watercolor down is if you are doing a painting that has a colored background and goes out more towards the edges, they'd like to have a margin edge around the edges that stays white, and the tape will help to protect the edges from getting paint on it. So that would be one reason that people might want to put tape on the edges of their painting. Another reason is that if you put a lot of water on a piece of watercolor paper, it can buckle a little bit as the water interacts with the paper, and the tape helps keep the paper from buckling too much. I guess I am so used to going out and sketching with these kinds of paper that the buckling is just a normal part of the process for me, and I don't mind it as much. So I've gotten used to the buckling over time and just consider that a normal part of the painting process. But if you want to wrangle in the buckling a little more, if you're doing something that involves lots of water being put down onto your paper, then taping it down can be helpful. You can see and hear how a single paint color can appear differently depending on how much or how little water gets added to it. So you can see even in this stretch of blue that there's some areas that are darker because they had a little less water, so there was more pigment put down, and then somewhere that are a little lighter because the pigment got a bit diluted by the water. So you can go back over the lighter areas to darken them. It's a little trickier to lighten darkened areas. In general, that involves lifting up some of the paint, because in watercolors, in general, the lightness of the color comes from the paper behind the paint shining through. So the light from the room goes through the pigment, bounces off the white of the paper, and then comes back out at the eyeball. And that's where you get the nice brightness that I like so much about watercolors. Sort of like a stained glass window, and it's being lit from behind. So that means you control the lightness of the artwork by controlling how much pigment you put down and how much light can get through it to bounce off of the paper. And that's a difference between, we'll call it standard watercolor paint, and gouache, which has a chalk in it. With the gouache version, which is still mixed with water, so it's still sort of called a watercolor, but with the gouache version, that chalk blocks the light from getting to the paper, so you don't get the same sort of glow. So in general, I tend to avoid gouache, and I tend to prefer straight watercolors, so you get this beautiful glow coming from the paper. And that's my preference. Some people enjoy gouache for its properties. It's more like an acrylic paint in that it's blocking the light from getting anywhere, so it's about the color of the pigment rather than the glow of the paper behind it. Right, so we're just working our way through painting the G. And you notice that I am not being super picky about staying within the lines. I like the rough, sketchy kind of look to things. That is, I suppose, more casual and relaxed. If you want to be more precise about things, that is fine too. It is up to you. It's all whatever style you want to go for. I imagine it's about the type of painters that we really enjoy. The painters that I enjoy the artwork of have a very casual, relaxed style to them. And that had me forming my own style to be of that ilk, we'll say. Alright. Oh, hey Laura, good to see you. Welcome. Alright, so that now has to dry. If I were to paint something right next to that wet blue, then it would be likely to smear because the wet paint in the blue area would run into the wet paint of whatever other area I was working on, and that would be a problem. Alright, so if I can't put in anything that touches that, which would be the inside of the G, or the cat, or the flower, let's add something else in here that is completely not touching, and that way we have something else we can work on. So how about a butterfly? Alright, so here we go. We're going to go freehand. Much as I said, always draw in pencil first. I don't want to have it too cluttered. We've already got flowers in there, we've already got a cat in there. Let's have a butterfly out here, maybe. Alright, got a butterfly. Give that ink a moment to dry. We'll give it a little bit of a blue center, I think. And I suppose we can make the petals of this be blue. Alright. Alright, so that is safe. I don't think that G has dried too much, but we might be able to work on the cat and just be really careful about where the cat touches the letter G. Now normally I would do a black cat, and I think that I will do a black cat. Alright, so we got some black here. So I'm going to do this in two segments. I'm going to do the body first. I'm going to be really careful when I go up against the blue area. Just try to prevent the black from spreading out into the blue. Get the tail. Alright, and then I'm going to go a little darker for the head just so that there's some differentiation between the head area and the body area. I don't want to go too dark because then I will lose the detail in the face, which is going to be mostly lost anyway, but I want a little bit of a hint for the eyes and nose and things. There we go. Alright, so we still get the basic gist of it being a cat. Alrighty. Got cat. Put some darker areas down here to be where the paws are. Little hints of where the arms and legs might be. Alright, what color do we want to make the other part? I think we said silver. So I have a little dollop of silver that I keep here for doing metallic stuff with. At some point I should probably find one of these other bins that I'm just really not using and put the gold and silver in there, but for now I've got it out here. And hopefully I'll start working from the center where it's not touching anything and then carefully work my way outwards. If I was not doing this for a video, what I might normally do is work on two letters at once, and while one of them is drying, work on parts of the other one, and then while parts of that were drying, go back and work on the first one. But here we're just trying to do one letter from start to finish, so I'm taking a little more risks about working on sections that are close to other sections which are still wet, and trying to be careful about not having them run into each other. So I'm just being cautious as I get to the blue edge. The blue is still pretty wet, to make sure that I don't touch it too much and risk the silver and the blue merging together into one big silver blue lake. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer questions, offer suggestions and ideas. And for all of these letters, the designs that you use are of course up to you, and it's great to personalize them based on the person that you're doing them for. So if they have a favorite color, or if they have a favorite pet. Different kinds of designs they enjoy. It is a wonderful idea to incorporate all of those into your painting. You know, if you're going to do a letter for someone, you might as well make it individual to them. It's pretty amazing that we are all individual people with all the billions of us that are in the world, that every one of us has our own interests and books we like and TV shows we like and so on. Something that we should really appreciate and celebrate. It'd be a pretty boring world if we were all exactly the same robotic clones of each other. So it's a lovely thing that we have so many different interests and styles and so on. Alright, so I got most of the G done. I have to get the little nook in here. Okie doke. I think I'll do brown for the little pot. There we go. I think I'll do brown for the butterfly. In general, when you're painting, you want to think about a color theme for the painting you were going to work on. It generally works better if you don't throw every single color under the sun into it, but that you have a group of related colors that work well together. It helps to make the painting look a little more coherent. And a few little leaves. Alright, so we got main color, a secondary color, some little leaves. Now we did the blue first, so the blue was closest to being dry. I like to put in little accent dots, and I think in this case I'll do it in black to go with the black of the cat. And in fact, I think I will also, as much as I like going outside the lines, I think with my straightening effort here, I went a little further outside the lines than I normally like. So the way that one can pick up color is to get the brush a little wet so it's clean and wet, and then pull off a little bit of the water so it's damp. So damp rather than soaking. And then when you go over an area, you're sort of like acting like a sponge and lifting up the color. Now some colors are more stainy than others, so red tends not to lift up as much. Black, as you see, is not completely coming up, but at least it's lightening it a little more. So it's a little gentler in this area where it went out. Alright, so I like that. Alright, so I want to put little black dots around the edge, and it will be subtle because the blue is already a fairly dark color, and then the black will be a dark color on top of that, but just to add a little bit of detail and interest to things. I'm getting some black, and this is part of the benefit of having a brush that has a wide part and then a nice point. You can just use the same brush instead of having to switch over to another brush. And those little dots are just barely visible, but I like those little subtle kinds of effects. Just something that you add a little extra effort to making this pretty. Maybe they're like little rivets, little decorations. Whatever they are. Right. And down around here. There's always a fine line when you're doing these between adding enough decoration to make it interesting and adding so much decoration that it's a clutter of shapes and it's hard for the eye to figure out what they are even looking at. Because, for example, now I'm looking at the silver area and saying, oh, well, maybe I could add something in there to the silver area too. But maybe I should just leave the silver area alone. Alright, so now we've got little dots in the G, we've got the cat, we've got the flowers. You know, I could add like something to the pot. Maybe some little vertical lines. I could add things to the butterfly. Okay, maybe I should stop there. Or maybe this is how it goes. Say, well, what if I do this? And what if I do that? Alright, I'm going to get some really light of this blue. So I'm going to put the blue over here. I'm going to add some water to dilute it out so that it's a much lighter version of that blue. What I'm going to do is add in an extra layer of petals. Alright, so now the petals have a little more visual interest to them. But I think I'm going to stop there. But I think you get the idea here, that you can make the base letter G, and then you can add whatever flowers or shapes or other kinds of things to it that you want to. Sign your work. And there you have a letter G. Hey Deb, good to see you. Alright, so letter G. You can put whatever other colors or shapes or objects in there that you like that go well with your particular set of interests. So let me know if you have any questions about drawing initial letters. I am happy to help. And I hope you have fun making some.